Hey guys, hope you're doing well and thanks for watching today's video where we're going to practice and review the midpoint and distance formulas. So just quickly I want to run through again what we talked about in the last two videos where we talked about midpoint, which is the point of a line, a segment that divides the segment into two congruent, which means equal segments. And we talked about the different ways that you can do it. You can do it by counting, which is just it's only an option for when it's a horizontal or a straight line. So that's really not an option. Really what you have to do is use the formula, which is x1 plus x2 divided by 2, comma, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So this is what you really need to memorize right here. Let me underline it. So this is the key here to the midpoint formula. And so what you need to notice is that when you use the midpoint formula, you're finding the mean of the x coordinates and the mean of the y coordinates. So it truly is an average of the coordinates. So then we went into the distance formula. And the distance formula is is exactly what it sounds like. It's to find the distance between 2 points. You're finding the length of the segment that would connect the 2 points. It's a straight line that would connect the 2 points. And again, we talked about the different methods. We said that you could count. Again, we're only really an option for very basic examples. And then you can also use the right triangles method, which is when you use the Pythagorean theorem. But then we actually talked about how the distance formula is the Pythagorean theorem, just written in a more condensed and kind of easier way for when you just need to find the distance between 2 points. So it's really just finding the hypotenuse of the Pythagorean theorem of a right triangle. So that is the distance formula, and that is what you really need to memorize as well. So hopefully you've had some practice with them. Hopefully you are memorizing them, because now we're going to get into some tougher examples. Nothing too bad, but just a little tougher than last time. So assume M is the midpoint of segment AB, where A is -3, 2, and M is 1, -2. Find the coordinates of B and the length of segment AB. So we've got two things going on. First, I need to find the coordinates of that point B using my midpoint formula because I'm given the midpoint of the segment. But then I also need to find the length of the segment AB. I recommend, if you're just trying to practice, I recommend you pause the video now and do it on your own, and then you come back and watch me and see if you did it right and see if there's anything that you could pick up from the way I did it. So now what I would do, so I'm going to draw my coordinate plane just because it helps me see what I'm working with and where my point should be, so then I can compare it to my answer. Sorry, that's a really bad drawing. Let me fix that a little bit. So I'm given point A is -3, 2, so I'm going to write that in. That's about there, we'll say. So that's point A. And I'm given M is 1, -2, so 1, -2. Oh wait, no, A is -3, +2. My bad. So there we have A. And then M is 1, -2. Then I know that M is the midpoint of segment AB. If M is the midpoint, I know that A and M have to be connected. And I know that M divided the segment, the entire segment, into two congruent segments. So I know that B has to be in the opposite direction with about the same length as AM. So that means that this must be B, and B has to be somewhere over here. So I know it should be a positive x and a negative y, and then I can kind of reason out when I see my answer, like, does that make sense or does it not? So, and what is cool to notice is that this should be congruent to this. So now let's figure this out. So my midpoint formula says that x1 plus x2 divided by 2 should equal the x1 coordinate of the midpoint, and then the y1 plus y2 should be the y coordinate of the midpoint. So this is the x and the y of the midpoint. Well, I'm actually given the midpoint, so I can plug that in. So M is 1, -2. Well, the x coordinate of the midpoint needs to be 1, so 1 equals, and that's this right here, this x1 plus x2 divided by 2. Well, I know x1 is -3 because that's the first coordinate, so -3 plus x2, which is going to be the x coordinate of point B, divided by 2. And I can simplify and multiply both sides by 2. I get 2 equals -3 plus x2. Add 3 to both sides, and I get 5 equals x2. So I found the x coordinate, and that makes sense. It's at 5 over here. That's roughly where it should be. I like that. That's a good start. Then now I need to find the y coordinate. So now I'm going to say, well, the y coordinate of the midpoint is -2. So -2 equals y1, I mean, which is 2. That's this number right here, and I got the midpoint of the y right there, the y coordinate of the midpoint there. So negative 2 equals 2 plus y2 divided by 2. Again, multiply by 2. I get negative 4 equals 2 plus y2. Subtract 2 from both sides. I get y2 equals negative 6. So now I've said that my point B equals, well, 5, negative 6. And is that where I had it? It's roughly right. That would make sense if that was 5 and that was negative 6. So that looks pretty good. I didn't get anything crazy. It makes sense to me. So now we've answered the first part. We have found segment B, find the coordinates of point B. We've done that. Now we need to find the length of segment AB. Well, if I'm finding the length of the segment, I know that I have to use my distance formula. So the distance formula says, well, x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. Hopefully you're getting the hang of this. And then now I'm just going to plug in my points. Square root. My x2 is now this point here of our b, so it's going to be 5 minus negative 3, because that's our point A, x coordinate, plus, and now negative 6 minus 2 squared. So 5 minus negative 3 is 8 squared, plus negative 6 minus 2 is negative 8 squared. Well, that's going to be square root of, well, 8 squared is 64, and then negative 8 squared is also 64. Negative times a negative is a positive, so I get the square root of 128. So that is the length of the segment, but what if my teacher wanted me to simplify this? Well, I need to do a factor tree. So 128, I can then break into 64 and 2, because they can multiply into that, and then I can do, well, 8 and 8. Then when you have two of the same number, you can circle them and take it out, and you get 8 square root of 2. So the distance formula, the distance of the 2 points, between the 2 points, is 8 square root of 2 units. And it's important to be able to simplify those square roots. We've done that a few times in this course, but it might be worth looking that up online if you don't know how to do this. So you basically make a factor tree. So you start with the whatever is in the square root, and then you just work your way down. So you can think of two numbers that can multiply into 128. The first I thought was 64 and 2. And then for 64, I did the same thing again. Well, 8 times 8. Then if you get two of the same number, you can kind of circle them and take one of them out. So then you get 8 on the outside, and you're left with this square root of 2 on the inside, because that wasn't able to be grouped together and taken out. So it's good to be able to know how to do that. It's important for simplifying the square roots. This answer would be right if you just wrote square root of 128, but sometimes teachers will want you to simplify your answer. And I know on the ACT they do expect you to simplify things like that. So hopefully that makes sense. That was just our first example, and now let's get into our second. So the length of segment CD is 12 units. If point C is at -1, 4, and point D's x coordinate is 3, find point D's y coordinate and the segment's midpoint. Again, we got a lot going on right now. I recommend that you pause the video and try to do it yourself before watching what I do, but if not, let's go. Let's go right into it. So if point C is at -1, 4, point D's x coordinate is at 3, so I know I have C equals -1, 4. I know that D equals 3, comma y. I don't know what that is. I'm going to say y2. We'll make that the second coordinate. And I want to find point D's y coordinate, so I want to find that. Okay. And I want to find the segment's midpoint. Well, before I find the midpoint, I have to know the other point, the edge. So I have to know point D first. So we need to figure that out first. And we can use this, the length of segment CD is 12 units. So I know that 12 is the distance, so I'm going to plug in 12 into the distance formula. So 12 equals the distance formula, which is the square root of x2 minus x1. Well, x2 is going to be this, so 3 minus x1 is -1 squared, plus y2, which we don't know yet, minus 4, y1 is 4 squared. Okay, so now I'm going to simplify as much as I can. So I get 12 equals the square root of 3 minus -1 is going to be 4 squared, plus y2 minus 4 squared. And that's what I'm going to be left with. And now it gets a little confusing. Like, how can I solve this? Well, I want to somehow get rid of this square root because that makes it really confusing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to square both sides because that is going to get rid of the square root. That's going to cancel them out. When you take a square root and you square it, they cancel. So I'm left with 144 equals 4 squared plus y2 minus 4 squared. Well, 4 squared is 16, so I'm going to get 144 equals 16 plus y2 minus 4 squared. Subtract 16 from both sides. I will be left with, what, 128, I believe, equals y2 minus 4 squared. So now I need to figure out, well, what y2 minus 4 has to equal 128, well, squared. So I'm going to square both sides so I can just get y2 minus 4 by itself. So square root of 128. So square root of 128, now that got rid of the squared, just like they canceled out up there, they cancel out down here, equals y2 minus 4. So I'll get y2 equals the square root of 128 plus 4, because I add 4 to both sides. So 4 plus square root of 128. So that is y2, that's the coordinate. And I could simplify that again. Remember, we just simplified the square root of 128 and we got 8 square root of 2. So I could do that again if I wanted to. So I could get 8 square root of 2 plus 4, and I'll leave it like that for now. So that is the coordinate of y2. And now we have to figure out d. Well, d is going to equal 3, 8 square root of 2 plus 4. And that's as simple as we can get it. I know this looks confusing, but that's all we can do right now. So that's what we're going to leave it as. Then now it says find point D's y-coordinate. We did that. It's 8 square root of 2 plus 4. And the segment's midpoint. So now we need to figure out, well, what's the midpoint of this segment? Well, I need to use my midpoint formula. So I get x1 plus x2 divided by 2. Then y1 plus y2 divided by 2. And this is just plugging in. So x1 plus x2 is going to be -1 plus 3 divided by 2. Well, that's going to equal, well, -1 plus 3 is 2 divided by 2 is 1. The total is going to be 1. Then, so now the y-coordinate is going to get a little confusing. We have y1 is 4, that's easy, plus y2 is 8 square root of 2 plus 4, whole thing divided by 2. Okay, well, I'm going to simplify the top. I'm going to combine my like terms. I can combine these constants here to get me 8 plus 8 square roots of 2 divided by 2. And again here, if we have 8 plus 8 square roots of 2, well, I'm dividing by 2, I can actually simplify that into 8 divided by 2 plus 8 square root of 2 divided by 2. And I can divide both. 8 divided by 2 I know is 4 plus 8 square root of 2 divided by 2. Well, 8 divided by 2 again is 4, so I'll get 4 square root of 2. So that is the y-coordinate of this. But if you wanted to leave it in this case, if you just got to this, you would be correct. All I did was simplify a little bit, so that would be fine. But now I'm going to get, so my x-coordinate of the midpoint was 1, my y-coordinate was 4 plus 4 square root of 2. So overall, my midpoint, I'm going to write it over, let's write it over here. My midpoint is going to be 1 and then 4 plus 4 square root of 2. This is the answer to our problem. We found point D and then we found the midpoint. This was a really complicated one. If you can do this, you can do any of the ones that you're going to see in your geometry class, on the SAT, on the ACT. And really, if you could just follow along and kind of understand what I was doing, that would also mean a lot, because this is really as hard as it can get. So I hope this was able to help. I hope this just didn't seem too hard and unnecessary. It really is good practice. So it has a lot of things going on. So thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions.